The students had better sleep than they had, as compared to the whole time they had spent at school. They were exhausted from the trip, and more than they realized both mentally and physically. Although a lot of them didn't like the military school, they had to admit it was nice to be back here. In terms of danger, it's one of the safest places they could be right now. Late last night, a message was sent out to all of the students, stating that their morning classes had been canceled. At the same time, in the afternoon, they would be required to return to their homeroom classes. Before anything else, Quinn decided to make a stop outside the girls' dorm and was currently standing outside Layla's room. He had traveled there early in the morning, the second he was able to leave his room. It seemed like no one else had woken up yet. He knocked and patiently waited until a drowsy-looking Layla answered the door. She was standing there by the doorway, rubbing her eyes with her short pink pajama bottoms. It looked as if the shirt was barely hanging onto her, as the top of her shoulders could be seen. "Who's here so early in the morning?" she said as she finally stopped rubbing her eyes. "Quinn? Wait, Quinn!" she shouted. Quickly, Layla grabbed her shirt, doing her buttons up, as her face had gone bright red. If she had known who was coming to the door, she would have been better dressed than this, but it was too late, and Quinn had already seen her. Regaining her composure, she wanted to redirect the attention back towards Quinn. "Do you need something? It must be important if you came this early." When asking the question, she took a look at his face. Layla noticed that only she was flustered and worried about the situation, whereas Quinn didn't seem fazed at all. He didn't feel embarrassed by what he had seen, and the situation was only awkward for her. "I didn't realize I was that unattractive," she thought. Although that wasn't the case at all. When Quinn first saw her at the door, the first thing he noticed was that Layla had quite a nice body. The problem was, ever since he turned into a vampire, even though the feelings were there, it was as if they were suppressed. They didn't show up on the surface. There were a few times this happened to him before, such as when he was scared. For certain situations, he thought it was quite helpful. When going through the whole ordeal with Peter and seeing him eat the human flesh, he believed it was the only thing that had gotten him through it. Otherwise, he might never have been able to sleep again. The other situation where it has helped was during fights. Before, fighting as a human, the adrenaline would get to him. His hands and body would start trembling before the fight had even begun. Still, just as some feelings were suppressed, others seemed to be amplified, and one of these feelings was anger. There were a few occasions when he felt like this feeling had wholly consumed him and taken over. Of course, he had this happen as a human. When one was so angry they didn't even know what they were doing, and their bodies acted before they did. Only now do these angry episodes seem to be happening more often. Things that wouldn't have bothered him so much now grate on him, like the shopkeeper and when Sia stabbed him with her spirit spear. Peeking his head slightly through the door, he started to look around to see if he could see Sia. In the room, he could see a bundle of quilts all rolled up and a person inside fast asleep. "Did she do anything to you last night?" Quinn whispered. Layla then walked forward and closed the door slightly behind her as she shook her head. "We didn't speak much before she was a team member. Honestly, it's pretty much the same as she said before. We still talked to each other casually, but didn't say anything about what happened on the trip at all." Hearing this, Quinn didn't know if it was a good thing or a bad thing. Was she just trying to pretend everything didn't happen? "If you don't mind," Quinn asked, "would you be able to get her to come here now and say I need to speak to her about something?" "I can try," Layla said. Layla walked up to Sia's bed and planned to try to gently wake her up by rolling her back and forth. But when she was a few steps away from the bed, Sia said, "I'm awake, you don't have to wake me up." She took the quilt off and sat upright. Unlike Layla, she was already in her military uniform rather than her pajamas. She then looked Layla in the eyes. "It's one of your friends, right?" she said. "I'll speak to them, but please come with me." While saying these words, Layla could feel they were genuine, and there was a slight fear in them. It was a normal reaction after what she had seen. She got off the bed and walked towards the door. Without asking, she forcefully grabbed Layla's hand. She practically dragged her with her to the door. Quinn could see the two of them holding hands and didn't quite know what to make of it. "I was wondering which one of you they would send to come talk to me," Sia said, "but I guess it would make sense for the so-called leader they all follow to come to speak to me." "Leader?" Quinn replied strangely. He never saw himself as the leader of the group. That position, he felt, belonged more to either Vorden or Logan. They were the ones making the decisions most of the time. The reason why Sia had come to this conclusion was that it seemed like whenever they were planning stuff or talking, everyone in the group would always naturally ask Quinn for confirmation. It was as if Quinn didn't agree with it, then they wouldn't go through with it. Even if he didn't feel that way, it was clear he was the natural leader of their group. Ignoring what had just been said, Quinn decided to continue with what he wanted to do. He wasted no time and immediately activated his influence skill. Once again, Sia could see the person's eyes in front of her glow red, only this time, something was drawing her in as her mind seemed to drift away. Noticing what was happening, she clenched her left fist hard and was free, while the other hand was holding on to Layla. While Quinn was in the middle of using his skill, he suddenly smelled something sweet. "Is that blood?" Sia couldn't feel the drifting feeling again, and her mind was back to where it was once again. Looking in the direction of the smell, Quinn noticed that blood was dripping off Sia's hands. She had managed to dig her fingernails into the palm of her hand, causing an immense amount of pain, redirecting her mind somewhere else, causing his skill to fail. The action didn't go unnoticed, and even Layla was impressed. One would have to have extreme willpower to be able to hurt themselves to the point where they would bleed. The normal reaction for a human was to not hurt itself. Even the agents at Pure would struggle to do something like this. "Again, you guys tried doing something to me," she said as she backed away, now clenching Layla's hand even tighter. "Look, if it's about what I saw, I won't say anything. I don't know why you were hiding your abilities and power. The only thing I will say to you is, don't threaten me. I don't know who you think I am, but I'm not like the people you have met before. Remember, I'm keeping your secret, so if I need a favor from you guys, I'll be coming to you." With that, Sia slammed the door shut, and Quinn was unable to get the last word in. "Maybe it didn't work now, but I felt something," he said. Quinn could feel that it started to work, but her mind was too strong, as she was able to resist his charm skills. If he was to get his charm points over 30, he was confident he could remove her memory. For Sia hadn't told their secret so far, even though there were plenty of opportunities. For now, he would just have to keep an eye on her and trust Layla to make sure she didn't say anything. Still, he would prepare himself for a plan B. Inside the room, Sia's heart was beating at an incredible rate, and Layla could feel and see this too. She was wondering why it seemed like Sia trusted her so much. She was just as much a part of Quinn's group as anyone else. Sia then looked over at Layla and gave a big smile. "Do you not even think of me as part of Quinn's team?" Layla thought. With the first job on Quinn's list done, there were a few more things he wanted to take a look at. In his hand right now was the blue crystal that he had obtained from the tunnel from below. He was sure Logan would be interested in such a thing, but there was a second reason he wanted to visit Logan as well. To see and test out the details of the new skill he had obtained, Shadow Eater. A knock was heard on one of the doors in the VIP dorm area, and while waiting for Logan to answer, Quinn started to look around the place. The area around them covered the same size as the area of the boys' dorm just underneath. Roughly 250 students were living below, so it made Quinn wonder how many VIP students were possibly at the school. The rooms were far larger, but still, whenever Quinn came up here, he never saw anyone come out of their rooms. It made him think that maybe most of the rooms were empty, or maybe they just liked staying indoors all the time like Logan. Maybe there were some students they still hadn't seen or met that were just as strong as Logan and Vorden. While in the middle of his thoughts, Logan opened the door and immediately pulled Quinn in by the sleeve before shutting the door behind them. To his surprise, Peter was already in the room as well. "I don't sleep, remember?" Peter said, seeing that Quinn looked confused. "Don't mind him," Logan said. "He was just helping me with my research." Looking at Peter, it seemed like he was being used as a human vending machine. In his arms, he held multiple sandwiches and drinks and was just standing there in one place. If he didn't know any better, he would have thought Peter's master was Logan rather than himself. When did the two of them get so close? Although this wasn't a bad thing, it would be good if Peter could listen to others without the need for Quinn to use his blood or force command on Peter. Logan quickly went to one of his workbenches, where it looked like he was analyzing something. He placed a strange-looking digital monocle on one eye and had his tool glove on the other. "So, what do you want?" Logan asked. "I came to give you a gift." As Quinn said those words, he stopped midway. Walking over to the bench, he had spotted that Logan already had what Quinn was about to give him. Currently on the workbench was the blue crystal. It looked identical to the one Quinn was just about to give. The crystal was placed in a strange device and had multiple wires and crocodile clips attached. Information was being processed from the crystal to the computer. After placing the crystal down by Logan's side, he let out a big sigh. "I should have known you would have taken one already," Quinn remarked, and proceeded to ask, "Well, what is it? Have you figured it out already?" Logan spun around in his chair and lifted his monocle from his left eye. It was slightly red, as if he hadn't blinked for a long time while inspecting the crystal. "I'm not 100% sure, but I can tell you one thing. These crystals radiate and give the same energy as a beast crystal," Logan explained. "What? But there were thousands of them underneath the planet. Is this the first time something like this has been discovered?" Quinn asked. Logan then proceeded to pick up the crystal. Quinn handed him the crystal and replaced it with the other one. After confirming that both of the crystals were indeed the same type, he began his explanation. "I don't think so. I have a little theory. I always found it odd that the military was so concerned about conquering the beast planets before the Dalki did. It didn't make any sense to me. Sure, the beasts could be used to make better weapons, but why the need to beat the Dalki to the punch? I think that the military doesn't just want these planets for the beasts, but quite possibly for these crystals we found as well. Maybe these crystals are also the answer to where the magical beasts come from in the first place. They don't mate like normal mammals. We've confirmed that much," Logan explained. "You said the crystals were like beast crystals. Do you know what they do?" Quinn asked. "That will be part of my next phase. When I find out more information, I'll come tell you. Thanks for the second crystal. Honestly, I was afraid of melting the only crystal I had, so this will be a big help to my research. Oh, by the way, did you find anything in the tower that might be interesting?" Logan asked. Since coming back from the portal outing, Quinn had never mentioned going to the tower. He was always amazed at how Logan was able to guess things, and after lying to him before, it felt a little harder to lie to him again. He looked down at his hand and saw the ring. In truth, the only thing he had obtained from the tower was the ring. There were other items, but he didn't get any. "I only got this beast ring," Quinn said. "There were other kinds of stuff, even a strong-looking sword, but we were unable to get it." Quinn went on to explain further specific details to Logan. He didn't say it was a vampire tomb, but did talk about the blood crystal he had in his hand and how it had got taken away. "It's a shame about that blood crystal. It might have also helped us out with these blue crystals as well," Logan said as he went back to inspecting the blue crystals. Looking around the room, Quinn spotted the VR machine. He hadn't used the one in Logan's room for a while now, especially since Logan gave him the stick that allowed him to connect to the private servers from any of the VR capsules. "Hey, you don't mind if I use that, do you?" Quinn asked. Logan wafted his hand in the air, not even saying a word. There was no need to ask Logan any more if he could use it. There was now quite a bond of trust between everyone in the group. They had experienced a life-threatening event together, and that always seemed to bring people closer together. After entering the VR pod, Quinn logged into the private server and was now in the white training space. "System skill, Shadow Eater, info." For the first time after unlocking a skill, there was no information on what the skill could do or its effect. While trying to use the skill, it was the same result. Before, he could use the system to activate the shadow skills, and this was the same with his blood skills. He would only have to think of the skill before using it, and his body would slightly start to react on its own. After repeating this a few times, Quinn got used to the feeling of each action, and eventually was able to perform them on his own without the system's guidance. This made the timing of the skills a lot faster and the flow better. Some skills took more time to do that with, such as the daze and influence skills, where he still relied on the system for its help. So when he unlocked the Shadow Eater skill, he assumed the same. Only this time, when trying to use it, nothing would happen at all, and with no description of what the skill did, he was at a loss. Inside the game and room, he repeatedly tried everything he could with the shadow. Imagining in his head what the skill would be, he would try to initiate it using the shadow. After a couple of hours of trying, though, he felt like giving up. "System, why can't I activate this skill? It's unlocked, right?" "Once again, I don't know. Remember, I wasn't the one that created the system. I only helped design it." The system said, "However, I do think there is a way you can still learn it. The only thing I can think of is finding a teacher. another person who uses the shadow. Although, there might not even be anyone that knows how to use the shadow skill that is alive. Other than skill books, this was another way one would be able to pass down skills to others by teaching and showing how to use them. Family members and originals would often do this. "What do you mean by that?" Quinn asked. Once again, the system had decided to remain silent about his second question. "Isn't the shadow ability only compatible with vampires? Where the hell would I find a teacher for that, especially if you're telling me they're all dead? Does that mean I will never be able to use this skill?" Quinn was a little frustrated at the situation he was in. The skill had cost him one of the rewards he had obtained for completing the quest. Also, because it was the most expensive shadow skill to unlock in his system, he thought that it would be something amazing, something that might even greatly increase his power for the next outing, or even if unknowns were able to come after him. "Who knows?" the system replied. "I said there might not be anyone alive. That doesn't mean there isn't anyone there." Somewhere out there, on one of the beast planets, Arthur was walking by Ruby's side when suddenly his nose felt itchy and a big sneeze came out. "Whoa, someone must be talking about me," Arthur remarked. Inside one of the homeroom classes, at the front of the class, was a single person sitting at his desk. A holographic display was in front of him with the list of all the students' names in the class. Both of his hands were up by the side of his head. Any second now he felt like he would pull his hair apart. "Why the hell does the school care about this event so much?" Dell complained. Right now he was trying to decide who to select for the 3 events that every class had to participate in. There were more events than these, but those positions were usually taken by the second-year students. Dell thought the same would happen this year, but it didn't seem to be the case. At first, he had sorted the list by power levels. He noticed that there weren't many, and the highest power level in their class was Vorden at level 5, while right at the bottom was Quinn with an ability level of 1. "Why did I have to be given a class with such weak students?" he thought. He knew there was a low chance of his class performing well, and rather than that being a reflection of himself, he felt like fate had dealt him a bad hand. Next, he decided to sort the list by the students' current rankings via points. This was based on the 2 assessments that had been conducted so far. The list drastically changed after that, shifting Quinn, who was right at the bottom, to near the top of the list with the rest of his teammates. A part of him wanted to select Quinn for the fighting event, to see how far he would go and hopefully learn his place, but he knew the management team would think he was crazy for selecting a level 1 student to fight. A thought then came to his head, an idea that the upper management couldn't disagree with. Not only did Dell have to pick 3 participants, but he also needed to decide on 3 substitute places for the event. As long as he had some type of reasoning, then it would be fine. Just then, the classroom door opened, and the students started to filter in. It had just passed midday, and the morning off the students were able to enjoy had come to an end, as they were told to head to their homeroom classes. When everyone sat down in their seats, there was a heavy atmosphere. Looking around, they noticed that many seats were left empty by those who had died. Dell quickly closed the hologram. The teachers were allowed to know the rank of everyone in the class, but the students were not. Many of them already had an idea, as they could see how well others had performed. Once everyone was seated in their seats, Dell stood up from his desk and started the class. "All right, everyone, there are no lessons for today, but the reason why you have all been called in is due to the upcoming event. Not all of you will be taking part in it, but there will be duties given to each student to prepare for support for your school and military base." Dell then started to read groups of names in the class, telling them each what their duty would be for the event. Some were in charge of creating decorations and banners to support their base while in the crowds. Others were in charge of helping with supplies and bringing food to the event, and there were even more roles given to the others. No one was really interested in this, as everyone was wondering just who in their class would be selected for the 3 upcoming events. And finally, it was a tough decision, but now I will announce who will be participating in the upcoming 3 events. Excitement was filling the room. A lot of the students had an idea of who would be selected for the fighting tournament, but for the other 2 events, they had no idea. "First off, for the fighting tournament, I've decided to select the highest ability level and also one of the top-ranked students, Vorden Blade." As his name was called, Vorden stood up, so everyone was able to see who had been called and selected. There were no complaints from the other students, as they felt like this was the expected result. Other than Aaron, there wasn't anyone as skillful as Vorden. They had all seen him that day in the hall fighting his way out of a tough situation, only using Layla's ability. Next up for the ranged event, I have decided to select Layla Monroe. After hearing her name, she didn't immediately stand up. She thought there must have been some type of mistake. Yes, her main weapon was a bow, but there were others in the classes that were more skilled than her. Unlike when Vorden was picked, some whispers were going around the room, as they weren't quite sure why Dell had decided this. I can see there is some confusion. The reason Layla has been selected is because of her ability. It matches well with her weapon. As you may know, the event differs slightly every year. I believe her versatile skills in using the bow will come in handy. Not only that, but she is currently one of the top students out of the first years in terms of points. This could only be possible for those that had at least some skill, Dell explained. Although there were quite a few students who still disagreed with Dell, they did feel like his reasoning made sense. Still, several of the students who had a range of abilities were looking in her direction. They couldn't help but feel that for some reason, a certain group of students were getting special treatment. After getting the most points for the portal outing, and now even taking 2 of the places in class. Finally, for the crafting tournament, I believe there is only one student in our class that is currently in the crafting club, correct? Benny Lee shall be the one who will take part in the crafting tournament. The crafting tournament was for those who mainly planned to become blacksmiths or some other type of tailor in the future. Their abilities usually complemented their forging process of creating great weapons and clothes. It was rare to have an ability that would match this, so they were quite hard to come by and highly sought out by not only different factions, but the military as well. Quinn was lucky that he had found Logan to create the suit for him. Otherwise, he would have to go off and search for a forger like Benny. Eventually, though, he knew he would have to search for one of these people in the future. If he wanted to carry on getting stronger, for him, he could rely on the shop for now, but the top equipment in the world needed to be created by top-class forgers. Quinn was a little upset that he was unable to participate in the event. He remembered Nate, who he had met in the VR game, had mentioned it multiple times. Quinn was also interested in facing him and other strong opponents. They had a plan with Vorden if anyone was ever to find out Quinn used shadow abilities. So there was a chance he could have participated in the tournament. Still, there was also the chance that there might be other vampires there who would see his ability. Day by day, Quinn could feel himself getting stronger, and it was only a matter of time before he would be able to protect himself from the threats around him. The problem was his friends. He needed to get even stronger so he could protect them as well. Now that all of the participants have been announced for the event, it's time for me to announce the substitutes. In case any of the participants get seriously injured before the event or back out and go missing, these students shall take their place, Dell explained. For the ranged event, Silly Dundee. For the fighting event, we shall have Quinn Talon. And lastly, for the crafting event, Sissy Rondo. The conversation between the students started to heat up now, as one of the names mentioned was someone who was well known in the class for being a level 1. Recently, he has been getting a lot of attention as well. "Excuse me, sir, but why Quinn? Isn't he the weakest in our class?" a student asked. But Dell surprisingly came up with a response Quinn didn't expect. "Do you think so? If we were to go by ability level, then perhaps you could say he is the weakest, but there have been reports that he has learned the martial arts taught by Leo quite well, and you all saw what happened when that advanced beast attacked us. Quinn was the only one brave enough to go in and try to rescue those students. Besides, it's only a substitute. Rarely has a substitute ever been called in to take part or fight in the tournament." Even though Dell seemed to be praising Quinn and giving him compliments, Quinn didn't like it one bit. He had seen Dell's strange character actions during the class's crises, and it didn't make sense for him to say these types of things. "If there are no more questions, then you are free to spend time as you wish for the rest of the day," Dell said as he went up and left the classroom. All of the current classes were doing the same thing as Dell's class, selecting students for the upcoming events and giving them each a role. While everyone was busy, inside the portal room, one of the green's portal energy started to flicker and warp. 2 guards were stationed outside by the door, while 2 more were also stationed inside to keep watch. They noticed the strange reaction of the portal. When something like this was happening, it meant someone was coming through from the other side. Both of them took a step back and got into a fighting position, while one of them pressed his hand up against his ear. "Report! Something is coming through one of the green portals. Still unidentified. We'll inform you immediately of what it is." Stepping out of the green portal was a human figure. It was a teenage boy wrapped up in a hooded cloak. He looked dirty and beat, and his skin had darkened from the sun. The boy started to look around the room. "Finally, I'm back! I can't believe it!" "Hey, you! Who are you? State your name!" one of the guards shouted. The boy held up both of his hands to try to prove that he was innocent. Wait, I'm a student here! Check your records!" The boy then took off his hood, revealing his face. "See? My name's P.O. Blank." The last thing she remembered before entering the portal was her wristwatch being chucked out in the distance. She made sure to keep an eye on it, seeing that it had landed on the cliffside. It was the only thing that she had that would allow her to keep in contact with the others. It made her realize what a desperate situation she was in. There was no choice now. There was no turning back for Erin. A target was set on her back by one of the most powerful humans in the world, and if she wanted protection from him, there were only a few people who could offer that, and one of them was the Pure Group. The man had grabbed her wrist and pulled her into the portal before she could even brace herself for what was to come. Holding on tightly, the two of them continued traveling through the portal. The man had a strong grip and made sure that Erin wasn't going to let go. The two of them needed to end up in the same area. However, Erin didn't try to resist. If she did, who knows where she would end up. They were now heading to the Pure Base, an unknown location that hadn't been tracked down by any of the big families or the military. A few moments later, the teleportation finished. When the two of them had reached the other side, and she opened her eyes, there was only one thing she could see: white. She looked around, and both she and the man seemed to be in a completely solid white room. The floor was white, the ceiling was white, and even the walls, making it hard for her to tell how big the room was. There seemed to be no exit or entrance either, and while standing there, the room started to freak her out a little. "Welcome. I hope James wasn't too rough on you," a female voice said it through a speaker. Although the sound from the speaker sounded strange, usually in a room like this one, the sound would echo as it bounced through the walls. Instead, it was as if the sound was being directed straight at her eardrums. She felt like she could hear the person who was speaking as clearly as if she was wearing headphones. Looking around, Erin was unable to even see any speakers. Assuming that the man who was with her was James, the person the speaker was talking about, she tried to look at him to see if he had any answers. She then noticed that he was already walking towards one of the white walls. As soon as Erin took a step forward to follow him, James immediately swiveled around and drew his sword, pointing it at her neck. The tip of the giant blade was only centimeters away from her throat. "I'm afraid you will need to stay in the room for now," the speaker said. "Although one of our agents recommended you over, there is still a chance that you might be a spy, you see. So we need to be positive before proceeding any further. After all, once you step outside of this room, Pure will be on the other side. I hope you understand." The voice seemed like it was trying hard to sound soft and sweet to reason with her, but Erin could tell that behind these words were threats, and James, pointing his blade towards her, made it more apparent. Taking a step back, Erin then proceeded to sit on the floor. "I understand. Whatever you need from me," she replied. "Excellent. Just stay in here for now, and someone will be here in a moment." James was standing there patiently in front of one of the white walls. It seemed like it automatically drew to the side and opened. He then left the room, while Erin was left to be there all by herself. She waited, patiently at first, sitting down, expecting someone to come back soon. She didn't know how much time had passed. While sitting down, she had managed to count to 1,000 out of boredom, and she had even waited for more before starting to do that. There was nothing in the room at all, and no sound could be heard. It was so deadly quiet that she could listen to her organs squirreling and making noises as everything moved all over inside her body. Slowly, the room was starting to get to her. It felt like the walls were beginning to come closer and closer, but she felt like it must have been in her head. Two people were watching inside the white room from outside. They were looking through what looked like a double-sided glass window. It was digitally created and projected with a white wall appearance on the outside to match the room. While the two people could see Erin clearly, she could not see them. One of them was James, the person who had escorted her here, while the other was a slightly older woman who looked to be in her late 30s. She had short brown hair, and her hands were behind her back while watching Erin carefully. "How long do you think she'll last there?" James asked. The older woman looked at Erin carefully. Right now she was still sitting on the floor with her eyes closed, as if to give off a relaxed look, However, if one was to look at her face closely, one could see she was in a great pain. Her eyes were twitching, and the goosebumps on her arms were already starting to show. "The longest someone has ever lasted in the anechoic chamber was 1 hour. She has done well to last half an hour already. She seems to be a strong-willed person," the woman replied. The anechoic chamber was a soundproof room that went into the negatives when it came to decibels. When inside long enough, one's senses start to get disorientated. The sound of your heartbeat gets clearer, the feeling of the blood rushing around your body is heard, and one doesn't know what is real from fake. Every new member of Pure must first go through this trial. The idea was for it to test one's mental power and state. It gave them an idea of how much potential a candidate had for the future of the organization. Specific tasks would require a strong mind, such as infiltration and so on. The two continued to look at Aaron while the timer above them continued. It had now been 40 minutes since Aaron had entered the room. Her eyes and body continued to twitch. "Is this some type of test? It's clear that this isn't an ordinary room, and they haven't come to get me out of here yet." She then thought back to seeing how mighty James was with his sword, and how he was able to kill the beast with a single swing. There were some strong people at Pure, that was clear. If she wanted to get stronger, then the best way to do that was to climb to the top as quickly as she could. Finally, she started to realize that closing her eyes and trying to focus the strange thought away wasn't working. It was just making it worse. Instead, she decided she would get up and start to practice some martial arts. She practiced every day anyway, and sometimes it was the best thing to keep her mind off things. When trying to stand up, her legs gave in, and she immediately fell to the floor. "What's wrong with my body?" Everything was disoriented in her mind and sound, that she was no longer able to recognize her senses. As she couldn't stand up, she started to think back to why she was here in the first place. Anger was always another good fuel for her to fight through the pain. She thought of True Dream. She then started to think of the Dalki, how both of these things had taken everything away from her. "Ah!" Aaron started to scream as she grabbed her head, and it seemed like she was going mad. 45 minutes, the old woman said with a smile on her face. "Looks like we have a new prodigy in our hands." James immediately rushed into the room as soon as he had heard the scream, but when he reached Aaron's body, it looked like she had already passed out. Sweat was dripping from her forehead, and droplets of water were heavy around her body. Brushing her hair back, James took a closer look at her face. She looked like she was still in pain. "You did well," he whispered. "Hurry up, James," the woman said to the speaker. "We must take her to the next area. More tests await her." When Aaron woke up, rather than a white room, right now she was in a pitch-black room and couldn't see anything. She felt a soft fabric covering her eyes, so she assumed she was blindfolded. "Looks like you're awake," a male voice said from behind. She could assume she had been moved because the sound was different from when they were in the white room. She also recognized the voice, although the man didn't speak much. She could tell it was the same man who was with her before, James. The soft fabric that was covering her face had been removed. Still, her eyesight remained almost pitch black. Whatever room they were in, there wasn't a single spark of light. It was clear that they were either testing her or still didn't trust her. There were always rumors going around about how crazy the members of Pure were, and although Aaron didn't outright believe them, as the news reports would be biased, after a few first impressions of arriving at the base, she was beginning to agree with what she had heard. The only thing that was keeping her going was the fact that Layla, who was also a member of Pure, was such a kind-hearted person. Did she go through the same thing? Aaron thought. The last room Aaron was in was torture for her. After just 20 minutes, she could feel her mind starting to crumble, but she held on for as long as she could. The room was there for a reason, and it was clear it wasn't made just for her. It might have even been used for training their members. If Layla too had gone through something like that, Aaron was starting to change her opinion of Layla being weak. She could imagine a regular person only lasting about 15 minutes. However, truthfully, she had no clue how long she had spent there. When in the room, a second felt like a minute. Although she couldn't see anything, she felt that her arms seemed to be strapped down and her back was upright. She was sitting on some kind of chair. The sound of James shuffling around and moving could be heard, and he seemed to be sticking a sticky substance over different parts of her body. "Don't worry too much. This is a normal procedure for everyone who comes to us for the first time," James said. "As long as you tell us the truth, you'll be all okay." The sound of another chair shuffling forward was heard, and James was now sitting directly opposite Aaron in the dark room. I just need you to answer me some simple questions. All you need to say is yes or no, understand? James asked. Erin was in no position to give snappy answers, so rather than snapping back like she usually would, she complied. Yes, Erin replied. Ding! The sound of a machine to her right made a bell-like sound. You are Erin Haley, correct? James asked. Yes. Once again, the ding sound was heard. 18 years old? No. Ding! Female? Before answering this time, Erin paused slightly. No. Ding ding! This time the machine rung twice instead of once. When answering the question, Erin had answered falsely on purpose, as she had a suspicion of what the machine was, and now she had confirmed it. It was a lie detector. Usually one would have an ability user come over and check if they were telling the truth. Since Pure didn't have many ability users, it made sense for them to use technology instead. Oh, we have a smart one, James said. It wasn't like we were trying to hide it, otherwise we would have muted the rings. But if we catch you in a lie, remember this will be bad for you. Very bad. James then went on to ask Erin more questions. Most of them were very basic questions at first, mainly there to confirm that she was who she said she was. Pure had done their research as soon as Layla asked for her friend to be taken in. They looked into the details and could tell her parents had died. The next set of questions went on to confirm that she had just lost her abilities in the True Dream incident. So far, it seemed like everything was going well, and she wasn't a spy. All the information was currently being recorded and being sent over to the older woman who stood outside the darkroom. Are you the only one that knows about Layla's true identity as a member of Pure? James asked. So far, Erin had almost been able to answer every question that had come to her instantly. For this one, she paused. If they were asking something like this, it meant that Pure didn't want others to know Layla was there. However, her hands were tied, even if she lied. They would know. The problem was that she thought about who would get the blame. Would it be Layla or the others that knew about her? No, Erin replied. At that moment, she wished she could see the expression on James's face. Perhaps it would have told her something about what they were planning to do to the others. Instead, she started to feel the fabric folded over her face once again. When she was able to see again, this time she seemed to finally be in a room with some sort of color for once. The room was small, and she was currently sitting at a desk. It looked like she was in some type of classroom that was filled with around 30 students. The others sitting at their desks were of all different ages, but most of them were younger than Erin and looked like they would be in primary or elementary school. At the back of the room, James and a few other adults were present in the room as well. When observing the room closely, she noticed that there were no windows, and it looked like the entire place was made of a metal-like material. Are we underground or maybe on another planet where the outside isn't safe? She thought. While thinking of ways to escape or where they possibly were, a person stood in front and soon started to talk. He didn't say much and quickly turned on a video. At first, Erin was quite interested in the video, but soon she realized what it was trying to do. The footage showed several reports that were never shown on TV, the bad side of the current system and how it was affecting people all over. Videos of shelters that had been abandoned and families killed. Videos of higher-ups torturing those of lower levels, while the higher levels enjoyed a life of luxury. She had to admit it did show the current situation of the world in a bad light, but Erin knew there were always two sides to everything, especially as someone who lived on the other side. Most of the people around here probably had a painful life as a low level, or being poor. In contrast, Erin was someone who had quite a luxurious life before. Not everyone was like what they were showing in the videos. Her family was a great example of that. They had stayed behind and done everything they could to protect the citizens from a Dalki attack. Of course, Pure didn't show those types of videos. A meeting had been called inside the Pure base. In a sizable dome-like room, there was a long table with several seats. At the head of the table, there were 5 seats, each with a number on the back of the chair. 4 of them were currently empty, while the only one that was filled was number 5. In the seat sat a woman. It was the same person who had been watching Erin this whole time, with James completing her tasks. Spread around the room were several other seats. They too had numbers on them, going from 6 to 20. Except for a small few, nearly all of them were filled. In one of the seats was James, who had the number 15. The female in number 5 stood up, and at the same time the rest of them stood up as well. "Please, there is no need," the woman said. "You know I don't like any of that stuff. The whole point of our organization is to make everyone feel as if they are equal. Please sit down." The others sat down as ordered, but still the mood in the room was quite serious. As you know, I'm the only single digit here, so I am currently in charge of the base. Today's meeting is a special one, as we have been given a special task. Soon the inter-military base tournament will be upon us. It's one of the only few times when all of the military base leaders gather. This will be our chance to strike, the woman said. The two soldiers guarding the portal entrance continued to keep their hands directed towards the student. Even though he had already stated his identity as P.O. Blank, they were soldiers and not the school's employees. A backup was called. A few moments later, Haley, with 3 additional soldiers by her side, entered the room. P.O.'s hands remained up above his head. They were visibly shaking. This was not the welcome he had expected. After being missing for a month or so, he thought his return would be welcomed. Perhaps he would be treated like a king for a few days, but reality hit him hard and showed him it wasn't the case at all. "Will you guys drop it already? Can't you see that you're scaring him?" Haley spoke. She knew that on the other side of the portal, they would have strict protocols before sending someone back over to the base. On the way here, she heard some information that the person who entered the portal was claiming to be a student. If he had been able to show his student military ID, then they would have allowed him to pass over. The only thing was, this turned out to be quite unexpected. When she entered the room, she half expected the person who had just returned to be someone from the Orange Portal Expedition. Maybe perhaps a student who had been left behind, but instead, it was someone from the original Green Portal planet from the first expedition. The only person who was confirmed to be missing, rather than dead, was P.O. However, he had already returned and even had his student ID with him. As she pondered over this matter, she moved closer to the student and was now at a distance where she could see the young boy's face. Although he was covered with what looked to be mud and sweat, she realized that something was strange. When the thought finally clicked in her head, she almost dropped the tablet in her hand. "P.O. Blank?" Haley asked with a puzzled tone. "That's right, but how do you know my name? I didn't think that you paid that much attention to me," P.O. responded, with a slight blush on his face. Haley was a beautiful teacher, and she was the only doctor for the first-year students. Even though she saw a lot of students, she didn't directly teach any of them. Out of the 500 names around the campus, he was rather surprised that she remembered his. This caused him to misunderstand and feel special about this encounter. "Is this student the fake one, or is the impersonator the one inside our base?" Haley gulped at this thought. She reasoned out that the one currently at the school was most likely a fake student. If someone was to try and infiltrate the base, then the second one who turned up a month later would most likely be deemed the real one. Still, as a precautionary measure, the student was cuffed with his hands behind his back, and a soldier escorted him off for interrogation. "Wait, I promise you, I'm me. You can check my ID card." P.O. started screaming. "You can see that it's me on the files, right? You guys already have my picture. Why are you doing this?" he continued to cry out. "That's the problem," Haley muttered to herself. "There's someone who looks exactly like you." In the meantime, Haley immediately went to inform Nathan and called an emergency meeting. Being cuffed up wasn't a nice feeling at all. P.O. started wondering what on earth had happened while he was away. Had the world suddenly turned into a dictatorship during his absence? Was the whole place taken over by the Dalki already? However, both of these couldn't be the case at all. Otherwise, he would have heard all about it on planet Caldi. "I think I would have rather continued spending all that time in the desert than be treated like this," P.O. regretfully complained in his mind. What soon came after made him change his thoughts. As soon as the doors to the supposed interrogation room were opened up, he was greeted with a full meal, desserts, and even a luxury bed in one location. He didn't know that the school had such a place. P.O.'s eyes were fixated on the food. He hadn't eaten a proper meal in days while he was traveling through the desert. Luckily, he ventured off in a certain direction, and when he thought he was about to pass out and starve from hunger, he came across a group of travelers. They escorted him to a shelter nearby. However, the bad news was that the shelter wasn't owned by the military, but by a faction instead. After the travelers kindly took care of him and fed him for a single night, P.O. was left to survive all on his own. He worked hard during his time at the shelter and gathered up as many credits as he could. Eventually, he was able to buy a map. This was the moment more bad news came. The distance between the shelter he was currently at and the place he had to go was quite far. If he was on his own, he still wasn't sure he could face the beasts he would meet on his way. This was why he continued working hard and earning even more credits. Luckily for him, his ability for being able to duplicate any type of beast weapon came in quite handy. It allowed him to earn the required credits and eventually hire an escort team quicker than normal people. He finally made it back. But still, during that whole time, he never splurged his credits on a good meal. Drool kept falling from his mouth as he stared at the food before him. "You can uncuff him now," a deep voice reverberated in the room. After hearing the sound of another person in this place, his eyes gradually averted from the food as his head turned in another direction. He was now staring at the second-year general, Duke. What? Why isn't it Nathan? Pio thought. Usually, as a first year, all matters related to them would be assigned to him. "Now, before we let you tuck yourself into this nice meal, I need you to tell me everything that happened," Duke asked. Duke had eyes and ears all around the school. It also included having some soldiers grab information from here and there. The incident of what happened in the portal room had reached him, although Haley had already instructed that no one was to leak any of this information to the students. The information may not have leaked outside, but it still managed to reach Duke. For some reason, his hunch was telling him that something wasn't right about this situation. This was why he had an unusual amount of interest in this. Perhaps the infiltrator was related to Pure. Ever since they angered True Dream, Duke had gotten the heat for that situation. He was now enraged with Pure. The female who wore white robes entered the room and did her usual job. While questioning, she should be able to tell if Pio was lying or not. After about 30 minutes of a non-stop barrage of queries, Pio's mouth turned dry from recounting everything that had happened to him in the last month. Every single word he said so far had been the truth. They even managed to confirm that he was the real student. However, there was still one thing that bothered Duke. "So you're saying that you never saw the Dalki? Are you positive about that?" Duke asked. "My memory is kind of a blur, honestly speaking, but I would have remembered a Dalki attack. So no, I didn't see the Dalki," Pio responded. The reports that were mentioned back then didn't match up. Originally, they assumed that the Dalki had completely killed Ben's group of 5. 2 of the bodies were found near each other, and later on, 2 more bodies were discovered. Although they were far apart from the rest of the group, Pio was presumed dead at this point. The original speculation was that 3 out of the 5 escaped the Dalki, and that's why their bodies had quite some distance between them. Despite their efforts, they were still killed. However, now that Duke thought about it more, the distance between where the bodies were found didn't make sense. The Dalki should have been able to kill both of those students in an instant. If that happened, then Pio would have remembered such an event for sure. Perhaps, the deaths of the other 2 people weren't related to the Dalki at all? "Thank you. You may now enjoy your meal. Feel free to get comfortable in this room. You'll be here a while," Duke said as he stood up from his seat, left the room, and closed the door. Wait, did he say I'd be here a while? Once Pio mouthed these words, 2 soldiers stood in front of the door and blocked the exit. The selection process for deciding which students would take part in the intermilitary event had been decided. In Logan's class, they had just finished selecting the roles. Logan himself had been selected for the crafting event. Since there were no known crafters in his class, he openly volunteered for the role. There were a few people who thought that he should have taken part in the fighting tournament instead, but he refused, saying that fighting didn't interest him. Just as the class was about to be dismissed, 4 soldiers suddenly entered the room. "We are here to collect the student known as Pio Blank," one of them announced as they scanned the area. After spotting the target, the soldiers were already moving to where Pio was. There wasn't any time to react, and Peter didn't know what to do. "Just follow along for now," Logan whispered to him. The soldiers immediately placed both of Peter's hands behind his back before cuffing him. 2 of the soldiers held Peter by the arm as they guided him out of the room. Just as they were about to leave, Logan reached out and grabbed Peter. "Where are you taking him, and for what reason? He's done nothing wrong," Logan exclaimed. "Let go of him, or should I make you let go, brat?" the soldier answered him. "This is a direct order from General Duke. If you decide to obstruct our duties, then we have permission to punish you." Logan hesitantly released his grip, but not before allowing one of his spiders to climb into Peter's sleeve. As Logan watched Peter walk away with the soldiers, he had one thought in his mind. He's been caught. The little mechanical spider was neatly tucked underneath Peter's shirt collar. It climbed up from below his sleeve and was now in the prime position for it to listen to and hear everything around it. Although the spider acted as a microphone and at times a small speaker, it was unable to be used for transmitting any video footage. The other problem was that the situation that just occurred was unexpected for Logan. He was completely unprepared and never thought that something like this might have happened. While the sound recorded by the spider was sent to the computer in his room, he could listen to it at any time later. However, that wasn't good enough. He needed to be aware of what was currently happening. Luckily for him, the soldiers who came to grab Peter did so when classes ended for the day. This allowed Logan to head back to his room as fast as possible. As he was returning, he placed his other hand on the watch on his wrist and sent out a message. "This is an emergency. Everyone is to gather right now. Peter has been caught. I repeat, Peter has been caught. Everyone meet me in my room ASAP." When the message was sent out, all of their group's watches started to light up. After what happened with True Dream, Logan made sure that the adjustments he made to everyone's watches were permanent. The messages he sent were encrypted. In addition, all of their whereabouts were also sent to Logan's computer in real time. Once they saw the message, a devastating look could be seen on their faces. If they found Peter, then it was only a matter of time before their involvement would be discovered as well. In an instant, they all quickly rushed towards the same location. When Logan entered his room, he immediately ran towards the computer and listened to the spider's transmission. However, there has barely been any sound so far. The soldiers were only silently escorting Peter. All the while they did this, they didn't say a word to each other. "That's good, Peter. We still aren't aware of how much they know yet," Logan muttered. The next thing he had to do was check where they had taken him. If things went bad, then they would perhaps be able to come up with a similar plan to the one they did with True Dream. After checking the information and looking at Peter's trail, Logan slightly raised his eyebrows. "Now, why are they taking you there?" he thought. Peter's tracks led directly to the second-year building. The school campus was mainly composed of 3 main buildings, with several smaller ones around it, almost similar to the martial arts hall. It consisted of the first-year building, the second-year building, and finally, a separate building for the teachers and soldiers who worked as guards. These people would often rotate in and out with the others from the military base. This building was also the location where important meetings would be held. When Logan was busy thinking about the possibilities, people started entering his room, the first one being Quinn. The door snapped open as he shot inside at a nearly incredible speed. "Can you close the door?" Logan asked. "Oh, my bad," Quinn said flusteredly. When returned to close the door, a few more people entered the room. Unlike Quinn, they were sweating since they rushed over as quickly as they could. Everyone, eventually, who knew about Peter, was present. This also included Fex. "It's good that you're all here. I won't have to explain myself over and over again," Logan announced. "I was there in the classroom when the soldiers suddenly took him. I don't know what for, but I think we already know what it should be about. It's obvious, else why would they do this without any warning? One of my spiders is currently attached to him. However, we don't have any new information yet. There is one thing I find strange, though. They're currently heading for the second-year building." Both Vorden and Quinn reacted at the same time. They said one name: Duke. "What do we do?" Layla asked. "We have to get him out of there, right?" "Let's observe for now," Logan responded to her question. "There are many things that they could be accusing Peter of. We might have jumped the gun on this one." Everyone was now patiently waiting in silence for any new information that might come from Logan's computer. "I see you made it, P.O., Duke's voice rang out. "Please sit." Before he took a seat, P.O. glanced around the room to see how many people there were. This was perhaps in preparation for when he could find a chance to escape at one point. But rather than finding any possible weak links, he instead realized that he was in a rather luxurious room. It was somewhere he didn't even know existed on campus. When Peter finally sat down, Duke mirrored him across the long table. They looked into each other's eyes without saying anything. Both men didn't stop gazing at each other for even a second. "You're a strange one." Duke's words broke the sudden tension. "You didn't bat your eyes away from me. It seems like you're not scared of me at all, unlike the others. You seem to have similar traits to those of a trained terrorist." He now had a large grin on his face. The old Peter would have been shaking in his boots. His heart would have also beaten so loudly that he couldn't even hear his thoughts. However, right now, he felt none of it. The only thing he was aware of was the suppressed emotions of fear in his mind. He knew that he was in trouble, but his body and face weren't showing any signs of it. "Let me ask you this. What's your date of birth?" Duke started asking questions. Because it was a simple question, Peter responded instantly. Duke then continued asking similar questions like these. For every query, Peter would perfectly answer back like a machine. "Hey, he got all those questions correctly," Fex spoke. "It means we're in the clear, right?" When Fex looked around the room, he was confused as to why everyone's faces seemed to be even more concerned than before. The problem here was how quickly and perfectly he answered every question. Even to them, it almost sounded like Peter was some trained spy asked to infiltrate the school. "Well, if you say you're P.O." Duke snapped his fingers as a signal, and a guard went out of the room. A few moments later, another student was brought in. "Then who is this?" The man who was brought in was the real P.O. When the real P.O. saw a doppelganger of himself, he immediately shielded his eyes. "No, don't let me see it. Are you trying to kill me?" P.O. yelled out while continuing to cover his eyes. "What's wrong with you?" The guard said this as he gripped his arm even tighter. They had been rough with him for the last few hours, and still didn't treat him like a student. Instead, they handled him more like a captured intruder. "Don't you know that if you see your doppelganger, you'll die in real life?" Duke let out a sigh before continuing. "As you can see, the jig is up. We already know that you're not the real P.O. You're most likely a spy since you've chosen to hide your identity like this. My best hunch is that you're using a transformation skill. We have the perfect person for people like you." After waiting for a while, Nathan was finally brought into the room. He had an ugly expression on his face. "What are you doing, Duke?" Nathan stormed in while stomping his feet hard. "The first-year students are my duty, not yours." "I believe this matter will concern me a lot more than you," Duke coolly talked back. Nathan stopped walking and listened to him. Usually, Duke would bluff. However, he felt like the man had some weight behind his words. "Why don't you just use your ability to find out?" Nathan looked at the two students standing next to each other. They looked almost exactly like identical twins. Although their body shapes were slightly different, it was barely noticeable. Nathan was briefed on what had happened so far. If he wasn't aware of things, he would have guessed that they were twins. After lifting his arm and pointing it between the two students, Nathan asked Duke, "The left one or right?" "The one on the left," Duke said. A large bubble-like shape started to appear in Nathan's hand. It moved and slowly started covering Peter's body from head to toe. From another point of view, it looked as if the bubble was slowly eating him alive. When Peter was completely sealed in the bubble, he started feeling strange energy in his body. It made him feel as if he was being drained. In just a moment, he fell to the ground. Although he didn't feel any pain, Peter felt like he had just gone through a huge battle and had completely used up all his MC points. When he managed to lift his body off the ground, the others could finally see his face. "I knew it!" Duke exclaimed. Both Duke and Nathan knew exactly who the student before them was. They had already ordered other soldiers to put up search posters just in case they escaped from campus. "Peter, Chuck, but how? You were with Pure and your ability. It was an Earth one, not something like transformation." Nathan gasped in shock. "This makes no sense." The group had been listening to everything that was happening so far, but not a single one of them moved from their spots, apart from Layla. "What are we doing right now? They already know he isn't P.O. We have to get him out of there," Layla grumbled. "But how?" Logan replied. "I hate to say it, but for once, I have no idea how we can get out of the current situation. With True Dream, Peter hadn't been caught, and we knew that he was coming beforehand. This situation is something we can't control. They already know his identity, and if we try to help him, we would only expose ourselves." After listening to Logan's words, Quinn clenched his hand into a fist. Borden, who was right by his side, saw this. "He's right, there's nothing we can do." Back in the room, Peter was still trapped in the bubble, drained of his energy. Keeping in mind that there were multiple soldiers and two generals around him, he processed multiple scenarios in his head. After looking at things, he finally knew that there was no chance he was getting out of this. "Finally!" Duke had a grin on his face. "Mr. Jack Trudream will be very happy. He said to inform him if we found one of you. We'll wait for any further instructions."
Hi, Quinn here. Wondering what happens next? If you want to jump the queue and unleash all episodes, click on the link here and install the Pocket FM app.